Level up with CNBC Make It Your Money. Actionable advice from those who've made it. From nailing that job interview to negotiating your salary, earning more, building savings, and mapping out your financial future. CNBC Make It Your Money livestream is sponsored by Edward Jones. Now, here's Frank Holland.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Make It Your Money. I'm Frank Holland here at CNBC Global Headquarters. This event is part of our CNBC Make It series. Over the past few years, the world of work has undergone some major societal changes. And as a result, many people are now reconsidering their career paths. If you're one of those people, we've got you covered today with expert advice on how to take the next step in your career, from interviewing for a new job to negotiating a pay raise, starting a new business, paying down debt, and even saving for retirement. Yes, that will happen one day. Joining us shortly, Matt Higgins of RSE Ventures, who is a former guest shark on Shark Tank, and Jenny Nguyen, founder of the Sports Bra, the country's first sports bar dedicated to women's sports. They will offer advice on how to make your entrepreneurial dreams a reality, or, as we say here at CNBC, how to become a young boss. And later on, I'll speak with Douglas Bonaparte of Bonafide Wealth to prepare you and your finances for whatever comes next and set yourself up for long-term financial success. But first, how much do you worry about money, and how much money would you need to feel financially comfortable? That's what we asked Americans in our recent CNBC SurveyMonkey Your Money survey. And here with those results is CNBC Make It reporter Ashton Jackson. Hey, Ashton.
Thanks, Frank. In the latest Your Money survey, we asked 4,000 Americans a variety of questions about money and their personal finance. Roughly half of respondents earn about $50,000 to $150,000 a year, but 61% consider themselves to be living paycheck to paycheck. Now, this could be related to ongoing inflation, which remains a top concern for Americans. 61% says it contributes to their financial stress. Although inflation has come down from its highs last summer, the cost of many goods and services remains elevated. Almost 3/4 of Americans say they are stressed about their personal finances, and 55% say they're more stressed now than they were when the pandemic began. However, the prices of many items were lower across the board in 2020. Now let's take a look at retirement savings. 60% of Americans work for companies that offer 401ks or 403b retirement plans. While more than half say that they contribute to a 401k, 41% do not. In addition, 56% of Americans only have retirement accounts and no other savings. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, it can be difficult to prioritize saving money, but overlooking access to emergency funds or properly funding your retirement could set you up for bigger issues down the road, Frank. I'm curious with these results. How are you and your loved ones keeping yourselves on track with your savings during this time?
Yeah, you know what? It's getting harder and harder. Inflation, the rise in energy costs, food prices have certainly been an issue, I think, for all Americans across the board. I think one thing for me, though, I always remember paying myself first. I put money in my 401k first and foremost, and then I try to figure out everything after that.
Absolutely.
What about you?
Definitely that 10% every month. I try to put it into my savings account. I'll try to hold myself to that. But this kind of reminds me of a recent survey that I saw from GoDaddy that says Americans these days are straying away from usual American dream ideologies and turning to saying that happiness and, having well-being in their life is what makes them happier than money these days. So I feel like that kind of coincides with inflation today.
Absolutely. You can't buy happiness. It helps, but you certainly can't buy it. You have to make sure you use your time and your money both wisely.
Absolutely.
So, Ashton, I also want to ask you about an interesting conversation you recently had with a career expert. Tell us a little bit about that.
For sure. I recently sat down with Erin McGough, a filmmaker and content creator who you may recognize from her career advice videos on TikTok and Instagram. She's also one of the experts featured in CNBC's Make It upcoming online course, How to Ace Your Job Interview. We spoke about a variety of career topics, including how to ask for a raise, which can be super difficult today. Here are her top tips.
The first thing that I would do is take the word raise out of your vocabulary. I would replace the word raise with a salary adjustment, because at the end of the day, you're not asking them to personally give you more money. You're asking just for an adjustment. You have a professional transactional relationship. You do services for the company and the company pays you money. It's completely professional and it's not personal. The first thing that I would do is schedule a meeting with your boss and just keep it vague. Say, hey, do you have time for a brief 10-minute one-on-one on Friday? And then you want to go into the meeting and you want to give them a case to make a case for you. Because if you're at an organization, a mid to large level organization, what your boss is going to do is that they're going to need to take your case to somebody above them, most likely, and that's how you're going to get approved for the salary adjustment for the raise. So what you're doing is thinking about, how can I make logical sense to this company that I deserve an increased compensation.
Got you. And so you've had this conversation with your boss. Maybe they told you not right now, but they didn't give you a hard no. So do you go again and ask at a later time? How would you kind of reapproach the situation later down the line?
So you have to follow up with them. Most of the time, if you go to that meeting, there are three things are going to happen. Either your boss is going to say immediately, like I just had this conversation with one of my employees. I said, yes, I'm sorry I didn't come to you sooner. You absolutely deserve a raise. Your responsibilities have increased. You've been here for a year. I'm sorry I didn't come to you sooner. Absolutely yes right now. Or they're going to say, no, the company's not doing well right now. We can't do any type of salary adjustments or raises. Or what's most likely going to happen is that they're going to say, I need to think about it. I need to talk to some people about it. Let me see what I can do. So in that case, you absolutely need to follow up with them and keep being the squeaky wheel. Keep putting meetings on their calendar. Ask them, when can I expect to hear back from you? 30 days, 60 days? When can we revisit this conversation? And the same applies if they say no. You need to say, when can we revisit this conversation? Because unfortunately, this isn't working out for me at the moment.
What are some things that you can negotiate for besides money when having these conversations?
Certainly, there are a lot of things you can negotiate besides salary. If you're not getting anywhere with the salary conversation, that can be really frustrating. But depending on the company, there are other things that you can negotiate. You can negotiate flexible hours, paid time off, maybe other benefits like having stock options or your 401k match. There's lots of other things that you could potentially negotiate. However, that is going to depend on the company.
That's some great advice there. We're going to have much more from Ashton and Aaron coming up in just a bit. Meanwhile, if you'd like to pursue a new career path or even start your own business, the hardest part is knowing where to begin. Luckily, we've got two entrepreneurs here to share their own experiences and lessons that they've learned along the way. I'm pleased to welcome Matt Higgins, RSE Ventures CEO and co-founder, and Jenny Nguyen, owner of the Sports Bra, the first women's sports bar in the country. And they're joined by my colleague, CNBC reporter Kristina Partsinevelos. Kristina, over to you.
Thank you, Frank, Jenny, and Matt. Thank you so much for joining me. I was very excited because I have a lot to learn, even though I'm not right now ready to start a business. But Jenny, I want to start with you. It seems like the problem with so many great ideas is they actually never see the light of day. And I know I've thought like, oh, I thought of that, but yet I didn't take it to market. You, and this is according to some articles that I read about you, you were living comfortably and decided to open up the Sports Bra, a bar where only women athletes appear on TV. What made you so sure about leaving your comfortable life to start something completely new?
Well, there wasn't anything so sure about any of it, really. I think a big part of it was trying to decide what would be the worst possible outcome if it failed. And when I realized that, I have my parents, they live just about 15 minutes from here, and they have a basement, and I used to be a chef prior to opening the Sports Bra. So I thought, okay, the worst possible thing that could happen is if I lose my entire life savings, I move in with my parents, and I can use my kitchen skills to just get back and do like line cooking or whatever. So that to me wasn't, that's a big, like, starting from scratch, but it wasn't like dire. And so I compared that to what would it feel like to me if I didn't pursue this dream, and which one could I live with? Like which idea could I live with? Could I live with failure, or could I live with never having attempted it? And a big part of me just taking that next step was deciding that the worst that could happen wouldn't be that bad if I just, said to myself that I gave it my best shot.
So it appears like the what if really plays a big role. What if I didn't do this? And Matt, I'm going to pivot to you for a second because it's almost kind of a similar situation. Again, this is me reading stuff about you online. You dropped out of high school at 16, right? And then you went on, let's fast forward to many years later, you went on to back businesses that sold for millions. You invest on you're an investor on Shark Tank. You ran, 2 NFL teams? I'm confused. How do you go from, maybe the struggling high schooler to figuring all of that out? Did you have a mentor, somebody guide you? What?
My internal navigation system. First of all, I want to pick up where Jenny just left off, because what she said was brilliant, and it's everything. I wrote about it in my book, Burn the Boats, right? Basically, you want to embrace your inner catastrophizer and ask yourself, what's the worst that's going to happen? People tend to overestimate how bad things are going to be. We don't realize that we already have our backup plan hardwired into the factory settings. We're just going to figure it out. But at the same time, imagine if you don't pull it off. So I love what Jenny said. For me, it was always about leveraging, what am I doing today? What am I good at? How do I leverage that to bring me closer to my ultimate dream? For me, my dream's always been about freedom and autonomy. I grew up in poverty, took care of my sick mother. I spent a lot of years desperate. So I disciplined myself to always say, all right, I may not be doing my dream job today, but I have a vision for where I want to end up. How do I leverage what I'm doing now to make myself irreplaceable and use that leverage to get to my next opportunity?
Matt, I just want to follow up because you use the word desperate, and I wonder sometimes as certain entrepreneurs and those that are successful, that desperation gets them to the point of success because they realize they have to get out of whatever environment that they're in. Do you feel like that is part of the reason to your success and maybe what differentiates you from other leaders?
Yeah, no, it's a huge part of my success. First of all, I think everybody can put themselves into the same situation where they have no retreat. What the studies show and what science shows and history shows, that humans actually perform better when we don't have a safety net. Yet our parents tell us, our mind plays tricks on us, that it's prudent to have a backup plan. The reason why we conjure up backup plans is not because it's more prudent. It's because we want to relieve the pain of wanting something so bad that it hurts. And I realized at a very early age by doing something very radical, dropping out of high school, when everybody said I was going to be a loser forever, here I am sitting here talking to you, that if I was to give myself no retreat by making this radical move, I'd have no other choice but to move forward. And what I found is I kept putting myself in these situations where I don't have everything figured out. And you'd be amazed by what your mind is capable of when you have no other choice. I teach at Harvard Business School. We always ask entrepreneurs, give us some advice that you'd want to tell the 25-year-old version of yourself if you were sitting in this room. And they almost always say the same thing. Trust your ability to just figure it out.
Okay, well, Jenny, that actually kind of leads me to my next question for you. Matt just brought up the status quo and how that could be seen as a negative. Your company motto, the only competition is the status quo. Can you just elaborate on that, please?
Sure. So, the sports bra is the first business I've ever done or started on my own. And I started with a business plan. And one of the questions was, describe the competition. And when I thought really hard about what the competition for the sports bra was, it was really everything that everybody expects out of a sports bar. And so I just thought that's very status quo. And so to me, it's just the only competition is the status quo. Like flip the whole thing on its head. It's the opportunity to do everything brand new, which in so many ways is very liberating. There's the idea of having kind of a floor plan or a blueprint that's ahead of you. And if you veer off of that, there's some risk in that. But when there's no blueprint and you are able to kind of write your own, plan, you can make mistakes. And people in general are just going to be like, okay, this has never been done before. So the opportunity to make mistakes and learn from them, it becomes kind of freeing. When I got to that question in my business plan, I wrote one sentence, and it was the only competition is the status quo. And to me, that I really believed that.
Jenny, I just want to follow up, just given the title of the name of your bar, or sports bra, and the fact that there are no women bars out there, did you encounter a lot of pushback, maybe sexism, or customers that come in expecting something else when they walk into the location?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All of the above, particularly before we opened. There was a lot of haters out there. And, a part of it was I had some friends out there and they were just like, when the haters start coming out, that's when you know you're doing something right, because you're pushing the boundaries and you're kind of pushing some buttons of expectations and the status quo again. So I think that, there was a lot of folks that were just like, oh, we'll give it 2 months. Nobody watches women's sports, all kinds of things. One thing that I was kind of getting some feedback on the name The Sports Bra. And, I ran into a group of women who play soccer here in town, and they didn't really like it. They said that, it's an undergarment that is kind of a personal piece, and they felt that it could be like misconstrued. And when I heard that from them, it actually solidified my desire to name it The Sports Bra, because another part of women and girls in sports is kind of this hyper or over sexualization of their bodies. And so to take something that people have kind of viewed as, you know, not something people want to talk about or mention or taboo, and just make it the name of the restaurant, was really kind of breaking those boundaries. And I'll never forget the first time I went to go pick up an order from a gigantic warehouse. It was like a produce delivery. And I was like, oh, I'm Jenny picking up for the sports bra. And the woman picks up the phone and she's like, order for the sports bra. And it echoed through this giant warehouse where there's like forklifts and everything. And I was just thinking, okay, like now we've got this name that people can just say, and it's being like blasted on an intercom. And then I got mail from the IRS and like the liquor license with the sports bra, you know, and it's just like, okay, this is part of breaking down those barriers and kind of just normalizing, you know, not only a piece of equipment that women need to perform a sport, but normalizing girls and women in sports.
That's awesome. So clearly thinking outside the box when it came to the title of your space. And so, Matt, with that in mind, you know, moving beyond the status quo, and you mentioned this in your book, it feels like so many entrepreneurs just keep doing the same thing again, again, and again, hoping that eventually tides will turn. Can you just explain why that is not the right approach, despite so many people, myself included sometimes, just think, okay, you know, it's going to get better?
Yeah, blind persistence is actually a recipe for disaster. So we value trying harder, and sometimes when you find that things aren't working out, you're like, I'm just going to try harder. The word try harder doesn't mean try same. It means try different. So the most successful people in life, if you were to compare their PowerPoint for their initial business, it doesn't resemble anything like what turns out 5 years later. So part of the journey of being an entrepreneur includes iteration. But how do you iterate? How do you cultivate the ability to pivot and make course corrections? You do that by being self-aware. You look for opportunities to look within and look without. And I find a lot of people who tend to do the same thing over and over again, they're stuck. And it's because they're afraid to face their inner demon. So I talk a lot in my book, Burn the Boats, about how important it is to focus on your mind, how important it is to train your voice in your head to be an ally rather than be your greatest detractor. And the way you cultivate self-awareness, it's counterintuitive, is by taking a risk and sharing something that you're afraid to share. Just test the waters and open up. For me, it was talking about my mom dying and growing up in abject poverty. I grew up in a roach motel, eating blocks of government cheese. I couldn't figure out which fork to use when I had my first girlfriend, and went to her house in Queens, and I was like, why are there so many forks? And so it's about, and I share that story, and you know, it's nice when I get a DM from somebody like, first of all, I can't believe you're talking openly about XYZ, cancer, whatever it is. But second of all, thank you for giving me permission. And so when you test the waters and start to open up about vulnerability, you find out, like, one, nobody really cares that much. We're all preoccupied with our own problems. But two, it's very empowering because you just own it. If you listen to Jenny, who's amazing, right? Think about the moment, the twinkle in her eye when she realized that there was rejection of her idea, and she drew strength from it. To be successful in life, to be an entrepreneur, to be whatever you're going to do, you have to carry a little bit of defiance, a tad bit of belligerence, not bitterness, and you have to be willing to sort of share and realize it's not a big deal, nobody cares, and you're still amazing just the same.
It is so true, and it makes me think that often everybody is too worried to ask for help or ask, but I tell myself, if you don't ask, then the answer is always going to be no. So Jenny, to your point, and maybe I shouldn't use the word ego, but how did you give up pride in order to get the sports bra off the ground? Were you told no initially? You know, how did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to completely give Matt props on his two major points, adaptability and being vulnerable. I think that those two things have been huge in the last 18 months that we've been open. But sorry, go ahead and ask your question again, Kristina. I was just blown away by what Matt said.
No, it was very accurate and excellent, and it pertains to both of you, which is why we have you on a panel today. But I wanted to ask specifically about giving up ego or pride, because that seems to be the problem for so many people, is they don't want to ask for help because they're worried about the answer being no. So how did you put away that pride in order to get Sports Bra off the ground?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it was huge because I used to be a chef, and you know, part of the thing about being a chef is like taking up space and being in that room. And even if you don't know what's going on, you kind of like act like you do and you own the place, kind of an air of confidence, right? And so when I decided to open the Sports Bra, it was very clear, like from the moment I started to write the business plan, that I knew nothing. I knew probably 1% of everything I needed to know. Inside the kitchen, sure, I knew inventory, I knew like balance sheets and kind of those things, but nothing about anything else. And so once I came to that realization, I had a couple mentors who had opened successful businesses. And one of the best advice I got from one of those women was that take whatever question you have or whatever area that you know nothing about, find a person who knows as much as possible about that area and ask them every question under the sun until you understand it. And it just seems like a really simple, basic thing to do. But to have somebody just tell you that that is okay, I was just like, okay, I'm going to try that. And what ended up happening was, it turns out that, fortunately for me, the sports bra is something that a lot of people wanted to see succeed. And so when I reached out for help, people were more than willing to do whatever it took to help me get it off the ground. And then it was like not just people that I was reaching out to, these folks were reaching out to their communities and their networks that are very experienced in whatever areas that is, and was just like, hey, I just met this woman who's doing this really cool thing. Can you help us? And it was like wildfire after that. And the network just spread far and wide. And once I realized that people were excited to be a part of whatever I was building, it made it a lot easier to ask for help because people wanted to help. And so it's been a really nice way for me to like let go of my ego and also find that it's actually so beneficial to the community. And so many of those folks who helped create this space are some of our biggest fans.
Matt, Jenny just talked about being able to get help from people, but I feel like that's not always the case. And we're not just, anybody that's listening right now, this is applicable to absolutely any type of career or choice you make in life. You may not get the support that you're hoping for, and then that, hurts your confidence. So in that situation, Jenny was able to get help. But what do you do when you're an entrepreneur, you have an idea, you want to get a job raise or change fields, career fields? What do you do if you're not getting the response? People aren't responding. Mentors don't want to help you. Nobody wants to answer all your zillion questions. What do you do?
Great question. First of all, could just talk about being willing to, not be embarrassed, give up your ego. This is with my book, which I'm on a mission. I love it so much. And I've actually had to learn the indignity of putting myself out there and DMing folks and explaining my mission, my mandate, that I want to go ahead and change people's lives. And for me, it's been a journey to get comfortable because I'm not always good asking for the ticket, right? Like, I want you to consider my book, and I love the process of lowering myself, to be honest, and getting in touch with letting go ego. And then in terms of asking for help, Jenny raises a really good point about people do want to help you. What I find where people go wrong, I'll get a cold DM from somebody, they probably read Gary Vaynerchuk's book or something, they're like, hey, will you be my mentor? And I'm like, I don't even know you. Like, that's not an authentic relationship. Mentorships don't just form from two strangers, and I feel like people kind of lose the plot. You should be looking for a way to just get a little bit of advice, a little bit of support that moves you closer, moves you along in your direction. Ask a specific question. People at my level, Jenny's level, all sorts of successful people, they love to find a way to give back, but they want to do it within the construct of their own priorities. Jenny has a business to run. I'm doing all sorts of things. I'm taking care of my kids, but I really want to help, and I feel guilty if I ignore you. But when you say, will you be my mentor, it's unlikely to go anywhere. If you say to me, Matt, I have one question. I heard you on Shark Tank, and you struggle with imposter syndrome. Tomorrow I have a huge interview. Give me one sentence of advice. I'm going to answer that. If you have a discreet, so my number one advice to anybody out there listening is don't follow the advice about asking people to be a mentor or deliver value. Ask a discreet question that makes it easier for somebody to help you, and maybe over time an authentic relationship will form and they'll lean in. But people don't like the sense that they're being treated in a transactional way.
Jenny, Matt just mentioned imposter syndrome. Sorry to put you on the spot, but have you felt like that ever throughout this process?
Oh my God, all the time. I would say throughout my career as a chef, for sure, imposter syndrome. And I would probably say about 6 months after opening the doors, I was just like hardcore imposter syndrome. And it wasn't until I started to realize that, when I looked back on it, this is something that I built and this is something that I did. And I had a ton of help, but I deserved to be here. I worked really hard to get here. And so to own the hard work and the dedication to it, that part felt okay, I can step into that. And once I kind of owned that, the other stuff like compliments and people reaching out and, interviews and all of these things was a little bit easier to grasp. But, back to what Matt said about vulnerability and being open, one thing that I think people really associate with a sports bra is authenticity. And so a part of me kind of just owning my imposter syndrome too is to talk about it and to also admit whenever we make mistakes, and we make mistakes all the time, and learning from them, and then bringing our fans or our guests on that journey with us, and that has helped me to feel like I'm more authentic, and that to me it can defeat everything else, including imposter syndrome. And so now it's just I'm confident. There's so many things about the decisions that I've made to get to this point that have just been instinctual, and so to be able to say I can trust my instincts, that's a huge confidence builder, so that all of those things have really helped, but it's not like a switch that flips overnight. It is definitely something that needs to be worked on, and I think especially for women, it creeps in at the most strangest times, and it's a constant, and it's something that I have to personally work on all the time, and just remember that this is where I'm at. And one thing that I always tell myself before these interviews is that nobody knows as much about the sports bra as I do. This is something that I'm an expert at, and I might not be an expert at anything else on the planet, but this is the one thing I know, and so that's good enough for me.
And Matt, I guess I'll just leave the last question to you. And this is maybe more for entrepreneurs listening. You have those that have a great idea, but then can't get it off the ground. And then you have others that say, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to work for myself, but have no idea. What do you do? What should those people do, that camp, the ones with no idea but want to be an entrepreneur? Any advice?
Great question. If I were you, I would study Brian Chesky at Airbnb. Brian Chesky was sleeping on a futon in 2009, and he's like, I think other people might want to rent this futon too. I have no idea how he's able to deduce that the sharing economy would become a thing. The reason why I bring that up is a whole range of insights called what I call proprietary insights. They're insights that are derived from the way you live your life, from the context you were brought in, wherever you find them. They're insights into how the world could do something a little bit better. Shark Tank, which I love, it's my show, gives the false impression that businesses are built on patents or inventions, whereas the vast majority of game-changing businesses are actually built on insights, proprietary insights about doing something better. Uber, Airbnb, on and on. We all have within us a proprietary insight about how something can be done just a little bit better, and lower the bar rather than, I need to be like Lori Greiner and invent something, or the Squatty Potty. Lower the bar and think about what things do I know about how the world could work a little bit better, and then begin to say, am I passionate enough about this to make it a business, and can it be a big enough business to meet all my ambitions? But focus on your proprietary insights.
Matt, Jenny, you can't see, but sometimes when you guys are talking, the screen goes a full shot to you. And I'm smiling at so many of your comments, and I know our audience is probably feeling the same way too. So I just want to thank you both for taking the time to chat with us today. I could have went a lot longer, but I'm told I got to wrap up. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
In this world of FOMO, try to save 20% of each paycheck now to avoid FORO down the road. Find more saving-savvy advice at wisdom.edwardjones.com. Spending on non-essentials can quickly put a new business in the red. Track everything and trim anything you can to stay in the black. Find more business-savvy suggestions at wisdom.edwardjones.com.
Hi, I'm Lena Haas, Head of Wealth Management Advice and Solutions at Edward Jones. On behalf of the 52,000 individuals who make up our firm, it's an honor to sponsor CNBC's Make It Your Money event. For more than a century, Edward Jones has helped people to achieve what's most important to them. We believe the keys to long-lasting financial success come from building financial knowledge and resilience. That begins by listening to and deeply understanding the preferences and priorities of those we serve today and the generations we hope to serve in the future. Some of the recent insights we've learned about the next generation of investors include They define well-being as ability to live without financial burden, and yet only 22% report feeling very confident in their financial wellness. Many cite the rising cost of living and their ability to afford basic expenses as the greatest barriers to achieving their goals in the next 5 years. And while 75% report feeling confident in their knowledge about saving and investing, only 18% agree that they have the adequate skills and knowledge to manage their financial future. We look forward to helping current and future generations achieve what is possible as we advance our purpose, to partner for positive impact to improve the lives of our clients and colleagues, and together better our communities and society.
Okay, you've applied for a job and secured an interview for your dream role, so what's next? Let's check back in with CNBC's Ashton Jackson and career educator Aaron McGough for a few pointers on how to ace that job interview.
Nailing that job interview is so nerve-wracking. So I'm curious, what are your top 3 tips for really just nailing down a job interview?
Yeah, well, my first tip, the first thing that comes to mind is kind of funny, but it's to look good. It sounds weird, but looking your best is really important in a job interview. It's really important for several reasons. I mean, number one, just human bias. We tend to have a bias towards people who look better. There's something called the halo effect, where we tend to assign positive traits that we find in one person, like how they look, their abilities, to the rest of the characteristics of that person. So if you look good, if you look put together, it actually communicates to the interviewer subconsciously that you are put together. And also, we feel how we look. So if you feel good about yourself, if you feel clean and put together, you're going to subconsciously just act more confident. My second tip is, of course, to research. It's really important. I mean, the recruiter can know within the first 5 seconds of the interview if you have done your research or not. So you need to think about, where is this company as a whole? One thing that I recommend is going to Google, typing in the company and clicking on the news tab and just seeing what you can find in the news. Was this company recently acquired? Did this company just go through layoffs? Don't just think about your role at that company, but think about the company ecosystem as a whole. And then my third tip is to go into the interview, again, thinking about it from the company's perspective. So you have to think about the interview process in different phases. So your first phase is just getting to the interview. And that's just about networking, having your resume be optimized for the role, and getting it in front of recruiters. Then that first interview, that second phase, but the first interview is about basically repeating the job description back to the recruiter. So your first interview is most likely going to be with somebody who works in HR, hiring, and they are listening for keywords. They don't know the intricacies of your role. They are just like, okay, we're hiring a video editor. I'm supposed to listen to hear if they know about Premiere. So you just need to repeat that job description back to them. And, throw in a little bit more color there, a little bit more personality. But then when you move on to the other phases, the later phases, where maybe you're interviewing with the department heads or future coworkers, that's when you're going to want to speak more industry talk with them and get more specific as you get down the road. So those are my top 3 tips for job interviews. Got you. And what does post-interview etiquette look like, and how important is it? Post-interview etiquette is so important. I can't believe the amount of people that don't send a follow-up email after their job interview. It's crucial to send a polite follow-up thank you email after your interview, no matter what it is. And, if that interview came through a software system, go look them up on LinkedIn, and just send them a polite message. You have a few characters when you send that connect, and just say, hi, my name is Aaron. I interviewed for the video editor role at X company. It was so great to meet you. I'm so flattered to be considered for the role. Please let me know if there's anything else that I can supply for you to make this decision less daunting. Or, you can always kind of make something a little funny there, because what they do is that they have, a dozen or more candidates that they're considering. And that little thank you email just, it lets you end on a positive note. And it just communicates your professional etiquette. And I'm not saying it's going to get you the job or not get you the job, but it's just going to make your name pop up one more time for that HR manager or recruiter or department head. And that's not going to hurt you. It takes a few minutes to send. And I believe everybody should be sending a follow-up email after the job interview.
So if you'd like more career advice, including resume do's and don'ts, interview tips, and how to become a young boss, be sure to check out CNBC Make It's upcoming online course on how to ace your job interview. You can scan the QR code on the screen or head to CNBCMakeIt.com to sign up for our newsletter and get notified when the course launches. Turning now to your personal finances. We all know how important it is to save for retirement or buy a home, but those finance goals, they can feel impossible if you're paying rent or dealing with student loans, not to mention inflation. With all these concerns, it can be overwhelming on how to decide where to allocate your money. Here to help us sort all this out is Douglas Bonaparte, Bonafide Wealth founder and president, and a member of the CNBC Financial Advisory Council. Doug, welcome.
Hey, Frank.
All right, Doug, let's start off with one of the issues that's become, well, an issue again for a lot of Americans out there, student loans. The interest just began to accrue once again. Those payments are back due once again. An estimated 40 million Americans have to pay them back. Right now, how would you advise people to view what's become a major expense once again?
Yeah, student loans are a top 5 expense for Americans who have that, and certainly not having to pay them over the last almost 3 years now has been an ease on their cash flow. And now here we are needing to pay them again. And they do need to be paid. We've seen many instances where there has been partial forgiveness or some forgiveness, but by and large, really no forgiveness around that. So we have to take control over our student loans. And the first thing you got to do here is get organized. You got to know how many loans you have outstanding, all the information around them, including their interest rate, the outstanding balance, how many payments, what payment plan you're on, all the details. So the first thing I'd say is get organized, put a spreadsheet together of what all of these loans look like. And if you don't know where to go and you have federal student loans, you can go to studentloans.gov and you can put in your personal information and find out what information, or excuse me, which loans you have and all the details surrounding them.
You know, great tip right there, Doug. So I heard one key word right there, organization. So as you're advising people, I know you really focus on millennials and helping them manage their money. When you're talking about organizing your finances, where do you start? Do you start with an overall budget, or do you just suggest putting money in your 401k right off the top and then taking it from there? What are the steps that you need to take in order to be, quote unquote, organized?
Yeah, I love the whole mastery of cash flow. But before we get there, meaning understanding how money comes in and out of our life, the budget side of things, we'll get there in 1 second. The first thing I'd love for anyone to do is really understand what their goals are and put some parameters around that. So the first thing is to identify those goals. Is it to achieve financial independence? Is it to build a cash reserve, pay off your student loan debt, save for a home? You get to choose what your goals are. It's your life. And then the second thing is to quantify those goals by time and value. When do you want to achieve that goal? And how much is that goal going to cost you? Things like retirement, harder to figure out. There's more variables. But coming up, let's say with a cash reserve in the next 2 years at 6 months of your living expenses, basic math in addition will get you to these numbers. So you can solve for that very easily. And then lastly, and I think this is the most important part of a process for your goals, is to prioritize them. So in other words, where is the first and last dollar of available savings going to go? Most people have multiple goals. I just gave you 4 or 5 of them. How are you going to split up that dollar of savings across your goals? So that's the framework for understanding what you want for yourself. And then you want to get into that mastery of cash flow. This is to go back and look at actual behavior. How are you spending your money? If you can look at the data, you can take a look at what your behaviors are, and then more easily change those behaviors. In other words, if you want to save more money, you can look at which expenses you might want to pull back on. This is assuming you can afford to do that, but knowledge is power here. And once you do understand how money is coming in and out of your life, you can budget around that. You need that real data to actually create a budget that's worth something. And then lastly, to build out this foundation overall is to build that cash reserve. I'm a big fan of having stability and being able to withstand volatility. Life never moves in a straight line, right? It's always volatile. There's always ups and downs. So having that cash reserve 3 to 6, maybe even 9 months of your living expenses, which you'll know by looking at your spending behavior, is critical to then being able to move on to investing. I get it. I know money in longer in the market will compound more. But what good is investing your money if you have to touch those investments because something pops up? That's why that cash reserve is so important.
All right, Doug, that's actually a really important point. So you did mention investing, though, so let's talk about it. Yeah. I'm on social media. I know you're very active on social media. A lot of times I'll get messages from people saying, hey, how much of my money should I have in the stock market? And there's no one-size-fit-all approach here. But just in general, can you give us some basic guidelines of what percentage of your income should go into investing?
Yeah, rules of thumb are great for at least giving us some guidance here. Obviously, everyone is unique and has their own goals and ways to go about getting to them. You're looking at 10% of your gross pay as a good rule of thumb. So if you're making $50,000 a year, being able to put away at least $5,000 is a really good start. Obviously, more is better. Getting into that 20 to 30% category is deemed really good to excellent. Going beyond that, those are our super savers and super investors. But I would offer this guidance. What makes personal finance and managing your money so hard is that you're always trying to strike a balance between what's comfortable, and that's subjective to the individual, and maximizing savings. And when I say savings, I mean cash. And when I say investing, I mean assets. Maximizing or finding the balance between, again, comfort and lifestyle, expense, and your ability to consistently save or invest.
All right, so when we're talking about investments more broadly, I know we kind of touched on stocks and in your retirement savings, but one thing a lot of people ask about, and I'm sure you get this question a lot, how do you prioritize buying a house? Do you see a house as an investment? Is it a long-term investment? Is it a place to store value? Or is it simply some place to live and you can't always count on that return as people did in previous generations?
Yeah, it's a great question, Frank. I personally do not view your personal residence as an investment. I view it as a roof over your head and a memory factor, especially for those starting families and having kids. This is a place in which you're going to, call home base and operate your life out of. If at the end of the day, when you sell the home, however many years down the road, you make some money, fantastic. It's very difficult to keep track over 10, 20, even 30 years of every little expense and repair and addition you've made to that house. Doesn't mean you can't track it, but just generally speaking, very tough to kind of to calculate that return on your investment. So I don't view it as an investment property outside of that, whether it's rental property or investment property. Surely, we can earmark that as an investment. And as far as prioritizing a home, we're in a world where this is very difficult to do. Home prices really haven't eased. Interest rates have gone up. Buying a home has never been harder for your average American, and it doesn't look like that's really changing anytime soon. We would have thought such a drastic change in interest rates to the upside there would have brought home prices down, but we're not really seeing that here. So you really have to be a very diligent saver and really methodically plan out how to come up with that capital to make that down payment and comfortably live in that house every month making that mortgage payment.
So, Doug, I don't know if anybody told you, but this event's all about helping people become a young boss like yourself. So what about the people that are entrepreneurs? They have non-traditional income flows. How would you advise them to reach some of these goals, whether it's buy a house or save for retirement or invest 10% of that non-traditional income flow into investing?
Yeah, it's even harder for entrepreneurs like myself. You need years of experience to get an idea of what your revenue or income is going to look like, especially if you're just starting out. It makes saving more difficult. It makes allocation of those savings more difficult. Should you invest in the business so it grows, or should you put that money in the market so you have a nest egg for the future that's not all concentrated in your own business? But that doesn't mean you can't plan around that. It just means you have to do a little bit more. One technique I love to do with entrepreneurs is low, medium, and high. When thinking about cash flow here, think about what a not so great year would look like. Think about what a average or okay year would look like from a revenue standpoint, and think about what an absolute tear of a banger year would look like for you, and model out your budget and model out cash flow based on low, medium, and high so you can set some good expectations as to what things may look like. I would also argue kind of keep expectations to the lower side. That way you can kind of shoot for the stars and land on the moon. Or if you do beat your expectations, you have a surplus in which you then can allocate towards that cash reserve or saving for a home. It's just going to be a little bit more methodical, and you'd have to dive a little bit more into the details when you're running the show.
All right. I want to get to some of our viewer questions, Doug, as well. This question's from Cheryl V. She says, I recently bought a house and I currently have high credit card bills. As we've been talking about here on CNBC, credit card interest rates have reached a 20-year high. She asks, should I pause my automatic investments and concentrate on reducing my bills?
If you have credit card debt, consumer debt, and that interest rate is one of those toxic numbers, whether it's 15, 25% or more, you should definitely focus on that credit card debt and get rid of it as soon as possible. If you're investing diligently, let's say in the broader market, you're looking for long-term returns between 6 and 8%. This is very generally speaking here. Now, if you're looking at 6 to 8% returns versus 20% interest on your credit card, or really anything greater than 6 to 8%, and I can assure you, credit card interest rates are far greater than that, you are going to want to attack that credit card debt first and foremost. And I think the bigger point here is not to let that happen again. If you're accumulating credit card debt, it generally signals that we have something going on with spending behaviors that needs to be rectified. And you have to go examine that. Why are we amassing credit card debt? What can we do to prevent that from happening moving forward? Can we afford for that to happen moving forward? Are there big decisions we need to make or sacrifices to prevent that? These are the types of questions you need to be asking yourself. But yes, get rid of the credit card debt and never have that happen again. Right. Find a way for that to exist.
So, Doug, we have another question. This one's from Daquan G. Daquan says, I'm currently unemployed, but I think the question even applies to people just starting their career. They say, I am currently unemployed, but when I land another job, what move should I make towards my money future, being via savings, and how to invest? So if you're starting or starting over, what would you advise?
Yeah, again, I know, and this goes against conventional wisdom, and it may be a hot take, but you're constantly told to put money in the market as soon as possible so your returns can compound. And absolutely, I don't disagree with that. The sooner you can get investing, the more those returns can compound over time. But this assumes you don't need to go to that well and interrupt those investments, that you can actually stay invested. Again, coming back to this theme of having that foundation and stability, particularly around knowing your behavior and yourself and your own habits when it comes to spending money and saving money. How can we thread the needle between what's comfortable, immediate gratification, and delayed gratification, saving and investing for the future? But at the end of the day, I want to see that foundation built by having that reserve before you invest. Even if it means missing out on a year or two of compounding or getting your money in the market, if you made that sacrifice for the benefit of stability so you don't need to touch investments later on, it would be worth it.
All right, Doug, I got one last question for you. You're talking about long-term investments. I'm sure you get this one quite often. When it comes to retirement savings, do you prefer a 401k or a Roth?
Gotcha. So we're talking about, in this question, do we prefer putting money away pre-tax, either through a 401k or an IRA? So really, pre-tax, there's many ways to do this. It could be a 401k, it could be an IRA, or Roth dollars, also available through the 401k vehicle or an individual retirement account vehicle. So really, pre-tax money versus after-tax money. The trend right now for young people is the Roth dollars. This is money that you've already paid taxes on that will grow tax-free and come out tax-free at retirement age 59 and a half, versus the pre-tax, which goes in not having been taxed, grows tax deferred. You're not going to pay any tax on that growth until such time as you take that money out, also at retirement, 59 and a half, in which all of the money that would come out, or any money you take out, would be taxed as ordinary income. Now, in planning, the best thing you could have is both, right? You should have pre-tax dollars, you should have Roth dollars, and then even taxable dollars, which wasn't covered in the question. And it's really, the question really is, what are tax rates going to be in the future, and what is your tax rate going to be in the future? Your crystal ball is as good as mine. People thinking 20, 30 years down the road, a very difficult thing to do and really understand what that environment's going to look like, hence having that mix. But for those in lower tax brackets today, those Roth dollars are probably going to be more valuable because the tax savings of the pre-tax dollars isn't going to be as great. And if you're a high earner and getting taxed like in New York City or San Francisco, two worst places in the world here to be taxed, in at least America anyways, you're going to look at those pre-tax contributions to provide you with the most savings. And you can mix and match these things, of course, too.
All right, Doug Bonafarth of Bonafide Wealth. It is great to have you here, Doug. Thank you so much for your time and for your insight. And thank all of you for joining us today for Make It Your Money. We hope you came away with some new ideas on how to level up your career, build your savings, and are feeling more prepared for the future. For more personal finance advice and expertise, join us at the Your Money virtual event on November the 9th, where we will explore ways to maximize your returns, build a robust safety net, and navigate difficult challenges so you can become a young boss with your money. To register for that event, scan the QR code on the screen or head to cnbcevents.com/yourmoney. I'm Frank Holland. Until the next time, have a great day.